Welcome back, y'all, to the Creativity Made Easy podcast. I'm your host, Dustin Peed, creative coach and consultant, and I'm joined today by a very special guest that you may recognize from some of my earlier episodes when the podcast was named something different, and I was still trying to figure out what I was going to talk about. Either way, I'm still here. He's still here. Blake Behr. What up, Blake?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good.
It's going good. Got my coffee.
Got your coffee. Blake's been a good friend of mine for a very long time. And it's interesting how the Lord has continued to bring us together in different things. And now we cooperate, I guess, a company startup that we call the Culture Base, where we help people essentially, like, it's all what we're really digging into these days, Blake, is scaling teams and how to help business owners scale their teams. And guess what? It always comes back to the culture. And so that's what we're helping do there. But I'm here to help creatives know themselves, their process, and their teams so they can create greater things together. So today, Blake and I are going to talk about how to stay creative in every role. And the reason I chose Blake for this topic is because Blake is a serial entrepreneur, whether he would call himself that or not. He always has multiple things going on and leads his family really well. And so was curious as I was thinking about this topic, was curious how he does it all and how he stays fresh and creative in all of it. Probably some drugs involved. Maybe if you have a younger audience listening, tune it out. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, we as creatives, we all wear multiple hats, not just professionally, but personally as well. So how do we maintain a sense of fresh creativity in each of these roles? And so we're going to get into that today. Before we do, I want to remind you that you can follow me on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn at Dustin Peed. If you're watching on YouTube, hello there. So glad that you're here. Would love for you to hit the thumbs up, like, subscribe, ring the bell, all those things. And if anything that we're discussing today, you'd like for me to help walk alongside you in, coach you in, you can go to dustinpeed.com, click on the Let's Talk button for a free consultation on your creative process and work. All right. So, Blake, why don't you just start by giving us this is all the things I got going on so that we know, I know it's a lot. I know we don't have that much time, but just like a sentence each, maybe, of all the things that you've got going on, everything that you have your hand in, so that we can kind of understand the magnitude of our discussion today.
Okay. I have been married 17 years. In August.
Mazel tov.
My beautiful wife, Lindsay. We have 4 kids. We homeschool, and by we, I mean 99% Lindsay and 1% Principal Blake for the discipline. So I'd say outside of that, involved in multiple boards on an autism board in Johnson County, which is the county we're adjacent to, on a apprenticeship and development training committee locally, which is one of the local electrical apprenticeship committees. I'm on that locally, and then also nationally a part of that. I run Ridgeline Electrical Industries, which is really, where the main focus of my time tends to be. We are about 55 people in the whole company. We have an excavation company, Forge Excavation. We do the Culture Base, Dustin, myself, and another buddy of ours. I have a patented tool that we are starting to go to market with called the Pull Punch, which is a construction-based tool. I do a lot of coaching, consulting, and am I missing anything?
Author. He did write a book.
Wrote a book, author. Also in the process of, so that was a nonfiction book, in the process of writing a fiction fantasy book with another buddy of mine. So definitely involved in a lot of things and constantly looking for how to connect people to those things and how to innovate. I love innovation and love trying to see what isn't fully realized and help bring it to realization.
Yeah. So I lost count after 4 kids, but that's a lot going on. You got a lot going on. Principal probably being number one. But I want to get into like, so all of these roles are, not I want to say extremely different. They're all leading at some capacity, right? You're leading your family, you're leading the businesses, you're leading your way through this authorship, you're leading other people through coaching and consulting. So, how do you find new sources of inspiration? I think this is a well that often runs dry for creative people, and they tend to go back to the same well over and over again, even though it's dry, and they're not really finding a whole lot there. And so, some of the things that I talk about are like, you and I have talked about it before as well, but just like creative refuel days and things like that. But where do you go, Blake, to find specifically a source of creative inspiration? Because all of these projects and all of these businesses that you have going on, they all need things to be pushed forward and problems to be solved, right? That's what creativity is. It's problem solving. So where do you go to find inspiration? Where are you looking at to stay fresh, and how often do you do that? What does that look like in your life?
I think the world tells us, like, especially non-authorities tend to tell us and create rules for us as if they were authorities. Mm-hmm. I think there are a lot of people on social media who say you need to go find what you're great at and just stick to it. Stay in your lane. Focus on that thing. Don't deviate. And I think that's trash, to be honest with you. I think that those people don't have the authority, first off, to tell you and create those rules in your life. And so I definitely think that the where and how I go places and get into interests, like all those things don't feel like that I talked about, don't feel like they connect. But at some level they connect, and they had to connect. And a lot of times where the inspiration comes from, like, I think it was Einstein or maybe Isaac Newton who said that all ideas are in the air. And you basically, like, if they wouldn't have realized some of these things, they're like, somebody would have figured it out, because all the ideas are in the air, and it's just figuring out the time and reaching out and grabbing it. And I think inspiration is like that too. And it's all around us, and things to inspire us. I think a lot of times we block ourselves off from being open to those things. So, for example, like, how did I get into an autism group? How did I jump from electrical to the excavation? All those things at one point in time were in the air. And I would just say that I think a lot of the inspiration comes from adjacent ideas and interests. So not necessarily like, here's my main thing, I'm staying in my lane, but getting outside of your lane and allowing those things to come into your peripheral and then entertaining them. Now, where people end up going awry, and the reason we have these non-authorities trying to be authorities saying stay in your lane, is because we tend to just jump out of that lane altogether and not like, oh, done with this thing, go to the next one, done with this thing, go to that. Okay, you can't necessarily do that. I mean, you can, but I think that if you're trying to have creativity and work off of inspiration in multiple areas, which is, I think, kind of this podcast, then the ability to stay in that place, but also allow yourself to go to other places to dive into it, because creativity is a lot of problem solving, right? Yeah. And we love to solve problems, and we love to take ideas and expound on these ideas. I think the best you'll ever do is when you get way more general in life and not way more specific. Because if you're a hammer, everything's a nail. And if you have that ability to jump around and allow your brain to be in one thing, like hyper focus, and then just pull out and go 30,000 foot view and dig into something else, the something else is going to bring up solutions to problems in other areas. And so back to your original aspect question of where does the inspiration, it's everywhere. And I think it's your ability to give yourself permission to dive into those areas. But like, don't stay in your lane. I'm not preaching that, but be able to give time to these other things that allow that creative problem solving to exist.
Yeah, man, there's so much there I want to unpack. I know we have lists of kind of discussion points, but I feel like you're taking peripheral inspiration is basically what I'm hearing, right? So you're maybe something that you're finding in the excavation company is helping solve a problem in the culture base that you didn't know about.
Yep.
And so it's constantly by I love what you're saying by like, hey, don't stay in your lane. And if you're a hammer, you're always looking for a nail. That's gold, because I think society today preaches, hey, we need specialists, we need specialists, we need specialists. And the problem with being a specialist is that eventually that specialty may not be needed anymore, or it may change so much that you can't keep up with it. Yeah. But being a generalist, and I'm not saying being a jack of all trades, master of none, you can be a jack of all trades, master of a few, right? And so what I see in Blake is his ability to kind of know, hey, I'm not necessarily setting aside time for inspiration, which I do know you do, but you're kind of always on, like the radar is always up, looking for inspiration. Can you talk a little bit about how, because obviously all of these endeavors for you aren't solo. There's no, like even the book writing, you're doing it with another person. So how does like collaboration in your partnerships influence your creative output?
Yeah. So real quick, that quote, a jack of all trades is master of none, is half the quote, first off. So William Shakespeare actually is the one attributed to this, but he said a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. Interesting. Interesting that part of the quote gets taken out. Yeah, interesting. So to the question though that you're asking about the collaboration aspect, I think that we are foolish if we think that creativity and ideation and all of this innovation comes from your mind and your experiences and your perspective. So I learn so much by staying curious and by being around people that I'm not always around, because I think we think that, like, if you thought about a person being like almost like a fishing hole, okay, and hopefully this idea doesn't go negative, but like if a person was a fishing hole,
edit it out if it does.
I think a lot of times we think that as soon as we've experienced, fished at that place before, I've talked to that person before, that you have that full person and understanding. And there's just no way. I've been married 17 years and I'm still trying to figure it out. And so, but you start to get to know more about them. You understand their experiences. You see where they come from, their empathy, their understanding, their ideation, how they go through something to bring it about. So if you stay curious and you're around other people, there is just so much to be excavated out of a relationship, a collaboration, another person. And so I think being able to dive into like the idea of the culture base, the people involved in that, we're aligned in a lot of things, but we're very different. Yeah. And so the way we go about things and the challenges we have, if it was just me, like, we wouldn't go anywhere. We wouldn't have, we would have enough of something, but it would be like, all right, that's good. But like partnerships allow us to really move the needle and to bring something to a really fleshed out idea. And I always feel like where I'm strong in ideas is helping trip ideas into the right idea, but they don't come from me usually. I'm like, usually, like, people are like, how do we solve this problem? And they're like, well, we could grab a ladder or we could grab some scaffolding. And I'm like, what if we could fly? And then all of a sudden people are like, oh yeah, what if we did this? And like, I feel like I'm that guy a lot of times. And so I think where I'm strong is being able to get the ideas out of other people to help form something at the end. And so collaboration helps me get better at know my strengths and know other people's strengths. But I would just say that in that process, you have to stay ultra curious through the whole process. And if you can't stay curious and you're just trying to get the first semblance of a solution, it's probably going to suck, because usually it's at failure to something that we actually find the right solution. And failure takes a minute to get to. It takes a lot of like rubbing elbows and getting mad at each other and throwing other ideas and getting past the point where your ideas are sacred and how dare you talk about my idea like it's some child instead of paint you through on a wall. Right. So, I don't know if that answered your question at all.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely did, right? Because you're talking about how like you can only be but so creative by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That we know that we're created to be creative beings. Everybody has it in us. There is no such thing as like, you're a creative person. You're not a creative person. Everyone's creative. It's just a matter of in what field are you creative? And so how do you view things? And so when you get people in a room together who all view things, like Blake's talking about the culture base and how we all, three of us, the three partners that make up the culture base, like how different all three of us are. Like we're literally talking through right now Patrick Lencioni's Working Genius, and we're seeing on paper just how different we all are. But the beauty of it is that we have tripled our perspective, right? So there's three people with completely different perspectives. We have 3 times the perspective than I would ever have by myself, or Blake would ever have by himself, or our other partner would have by himself. And so there's beauty in being able to have that. And so I think so many times creatives, when they go looking for inspiration, you know, they might visit an art museum or things like that, or they might go watch a movie or read a book or kind of have a lone meditation time. All great things, all things that you certainly need. But I think that's a thing that we forget a lot, is that usually the greatest source of inspiration is other people. And so being able to work alongside them is a big bonus. I want to shift back into your personal life.
Something real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. With that, with like when you think of compounding nature, right? Like I think about how when you try to go to places of creativity where there's comfort, you're not going to get there. I would say if you're like, oh, I'm most creative when I'm, you know, it's a nice 72 degrees and like the lights are perfectly dimmed and like you're creating all these circumstantial things in order for you to be creative. I don't know that that's creativity, to be honest with you. I think that's great. Environments can help with that kind of stuff, but they can also hamper that when you think that creativity only comes through that place. And so I would say go to places of discomfort. Okay. So the whole comfort aspect is let's find people like me so I can be more creative. It's not going to happen. Okay. We've had instances like in our excavation company where we had 2 partners who were very similar in nature and things, and they're both amazing. And you would think, man, we're probably getting a compounding nature past, you know, there's 2 of them. We're probably getting a 2 to 3 compounding. No, when you go to like people and like-minded only, you're probably getting a 0.7 compound, right? Like as a multiplier. So you're getting less than even if it was just one person, because you're all just stroking your ego and really creating like real firm neural pathways instead of breaking outside of that. When you get uncomfortable, that's where the good stuff comes. When you get like, for me, the compounding nature we get with all the partners on the culture base is like there are 3 of us. I think we're getting a compounding nature of like 7 or 8 as a multiplier because we are really pushing each other to grow. And I don't remember who said it, but someone said that your level of success is directly proportional to how willing to be uncomfortable you are. And so when you go to those places of just direct discomfort in order for creativity to flow, you're going to get some neat stuff. I'm not at all bashing the idea of creating a good environment because culture matters. But I think when it becomes a linchpin to your creativity, that's when it hampers it.
Yeah, environment matters too, right? Like I'm notorious for changing up my office space every few months, right? But the people is ultimately what makes the difference. I'm in the middle of reading this book right now by Ken Coleman, who's an LU alumni. Shout out to LU, Liberty University. Ken Coleman works for Dave Ramsey, has his own radio show, and he wrote a book called The Proximity Principle. And basically it's his journey of like, hey, I want to be in broadcasting And so he just surrounded himself with people who were smarter than him in that field of broadcasting. And so I think sometimes, like, hey, I want to be inspired in this way. Go surround yourself with people who are doing that at the level that you want to have it done, right? So people, I think, is a great connection. Hey, I want to interrupt this episode real quick just to ask you if there's anything that we're saying in this episode that resonates with you and you're like, this all sounds great, but I need help implementing these things. I would love to talk with you more about that. Go to dustinp.com, click on the Let's Talk button, and let's talk about how we can help you know yourself, your process, and your teams so that you can create greater things together. I want to dip in a little bit to your personal life too, and just share all your greatest fears and deepest worries and anxieties. Now that's not what I'm talking about. I just want you to talk a little bit about I want you to talk about creativity in the personal life, because I think often as creatives, we like to segment out, oh, well, creativity, like especially for creative professionals, like, oh, creativity is for my job, right? It's for my career, but it doesn't really have a place in my everyday life, or it doesn't really have a place in how I interact with my family or my kids or my spouse. Can you just talk a little bit about what that looks like for you and how creativity plays a role in your personal life?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people, when they go home, they turn off, right? Like, again, this is maybe going to comfort quickly. And I've talked about this a bunch, so a lot of you I may have even said this on the podcast last time. The ancient Hebrew word for work is the same as worship, right? I say this a lot, but doesn't mean that our work, we worship it. It just means that when we're doing the things that we're great at doing, being creative, those types of things, it's worshipful. This isn't going to be popular, but I see my family as work. I see my relationship with my wife as work. And I don't see that as a 4-letter word. I see it as a brilliant thing. I see it as something worth investing creativity into my relationships.
Yeah, relationships take work. The best relationships take work. It's not an autopilot situation.
No, but I would say a majority of people turn off. You get home, you turn off because I deserve to turn off. I've done all this. I've done, and again, I think that's a misalignment to work and rest altogether. And so when I think about, hey, this year or this quarter, what does my relationship look like with my wife? What is something I haven't done that I need to be doing? Having thinking time set up for your personal life, for your relationship, for the stuff that you just want to do hobby-wise, having thinking time, which is 30 minutes a day, a week. I don't even care. If you did 30 minutes a month, I think you would be 90% further than the majority of the world. Okay.
Yeah.
So just taking time to sit with an idea and just think about it. Okay. I think it was Isaac Newton actually who said, it's probably not, but who said that the majority of man's issues come from his inability to sit alone, with his own thoughts. And so our ability to just sit with our thoughts and work through ideas has come to stuff like, hey, we're in a season right now. Okay. Circumstantial. We're in a season. And by the way, circumstances are one of the best things to create creativity. Okay. A lot of us use circumstances as like starts and stops instead of as opportunities for creativity. And so all of a sudden circumstance hits. We're in a season. We've got 4 kids. 2 of them are in diapers, which isn't our circumstance now, but it was years ago. 2 of them are in diapers. They all are completely dependent. We're playing zone defense. What's date night look like? Oh my gosh, we don't have anyone to watch the kids. And we started getting creative. What if, in order to keep a weekly date night or something, and we're only getting one night a week or one night a month for someone to come in and watch the kids. What if we did end dates, like staying in dates? And what do those look like? And what if you prepared one month and I prepared one the next, and you had to bring up this kind of an element and this kind of an element, and that's it. That's all you say.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you do that kind of stuff. And it's like, whoa, this is neat. And it's impactful. And no, you didn't have to go out to a restaurant and talk about how your week went for 10 minutes and talk about, wow, this is really good food or it's horrible food. And then you go home and you're like, well, good date night. Like we get so stuck in those things, and those things are good. Like it's still impactful too. But when you put more effort into things, I think the impact is also more.
Man, that's so good. I think we just need to pause there and let that sink in for a second, that the effort that you put into it is what you return. I've been saying that my whole adult life, when people are like, I'm just not getting anything out of it. And then you look at what they're putting into it and you're like, well, of course you're not getting anything out of it. You're not putting anything into it.
Yep.
Right. It's a cycle. It's not necessarily this whole karma thing that you get what you give. It's a mindset, right? Of I'm putting this in and I'm receiving back. Now, there are obviously toxic relationships and circumstances where you put a ton in and you get nothing back. Then it's time to shift, right?
Yeah.
But I think when we can understand this worship work, I love that your view, and I take a lot of inspiration from Blake on this as well. Like, I love that our view of putting in the work of what matters the most. Right. And I think, work is, like you said, has become this like awful 4-letter word, but I just think of it as being intentional, which I've shared on this podcast already, that's my word of the year. Everything I do this year, rest, personal, family, career, all of that. I want to be super intentional about it because I'm not guaranteed the next moment. And I don't want to be like, well, one day, you know what I mean? I just want to take advantage of the moment that I have right now in this podcast recording with Blake. Like, I'm already inspired to go like, okay, let's make our date nights or date days even better. We recently just celebrated 18 years of marriage. And one of the things that I brought to the table was, hey, let's talk about in this lunch that we got to have, what are some of your favorite, what are some highlight moments of the 18 years? And it ended up being one of the best lunches. The food was okay. The atmosphere was great. Food was okay, whatever. It was a lunch. It was in the middle of a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
But just being able to kind of go, hey, what if we just talked about this fact that we've been married for 18 years and bring a little bit of a conversation to that, rather than just going, like Blake said, all the standard, like, how's work going? How's this food? What do you think of the decor? Okay, let's go home. Great date.
Yeah.
Like, it can change a whole perspective. And Sarah and I, that was earlier this week. Yeah. And Sarah and I are still talking about, and we're still going, hey, I thought of another memory. I thought of another highlight, of our 18 years. And so there's ways to approach that. And
so, like, intentionality, because you're right, that's 100% this. Like, how do you bring this into your personal life? How do you bring creativity? It's intentionality. I was talking to a friend from high school the other day, and he was like, hey, what kind of vacations you got set up? And I was like, not a whole lot of vacations this year. We just bought a house, but we do have something we set up for our kids that, on big milestone birthdays, we have something big planned. And so on their 13th birthday, we're going to take them somewhere, anywhere within the nation that they want to go within reason. And that's like their big 13th birthday. And when they turn 18, we'll do that internationally. And he was like, how did you come up with that? And I was like, it's intentionality. And those things, we didn't just come up with that when, our oldest daughter's turning 13. We didn't just come up with that. We started that 13 years ago because we were talking about these things and bringing intentionality. And I think intentionality, everyone wants to know, what's my direct ROI for intentionality? And I'll tell you, I think it's more like taking intentionality and putting it into like a slot machine. Okay. And you put the intentionality in, and it can return a little, or it can return a ton. Okay. But you don't know. But if you don't input any intentionality into that, you get zero. Okay. Like, the return is definitely not happening. But I think the more you do it, you're going to have those big wins that build up to that point and help you create that. I'm not like pushing gambling. I'm just saying, like, I think that's the mentality is it's not always going to have a visible return. Yeah. But it can have a massive return. Yeah, for sure. And sometimes the return isn't, like you said, it's not immediate. It's a more of a legacy return. Yes.
right, of what's going to go on down the road. And that's, I think, more important when we're talking about family here, that we're looking at legacy returns. All right, so we've talked about kind of career mode creativity and all the things you have going on. We talked about kind of personal family life creativity. You hinted earlier about kind of rest and coming home and going like, okay, that's one hard lesson I had to learn a couple years ago, is that if I was going to be a better husband and a better father, that I needed to figure out a way to not have to turn off when I come home. That it's not necessarily like, and shoulders down. It's a little bit more kind of helmet on, game on kind of mode of intentionality. Coming home after work, or going upstairs in my case after work, like whatever that it means for you. So I'm curious to know, like, people are listening to this going like, okay, wow, you do a lot. I'm exhausted from hearing all that already. You're done with work and you're still not done. Yeah, in fact, you're probably even more intentional with your family than anything else of the endeavors that you have. I want to hear from your perspective. And I know you have a ton of stuff on this, and I know you've been, personally, you and I have been talking about it a little bit as well, but can you just talk about like rest and the important role? Because I don't want to negate rest. Rest is, you have to be able to recharge. You can't put out good creative product, or good, you can't push out this amazing creative beauty without having some recharge. So what does that look like for you? And probably the busiest person I know, but you still find time for people, you still find time for family, you still kind of find time for everything. What is rest and that sort of thing? I don't want to really say balance, but really it's just like, when can you turn off, and what does that look like?
Yeah. None of this. Like, I don't know that I can make it 2 weeks doing all of this if it wasn't for an intentional Sabbath. Okay. So for me, it is Sabbath. For others, it's rest. It's a day off. It's whatever. But I think when we have days off, we like don't ever really take it off. Like, we still do let our mind stay on other things that it shouldn't. Right. And we have the entire time, when I stopped being a W-2 running someone else's business for them and decided, all right, I'm going to jump in and do my own thing. As soon as I started doing that, we had Sabbath kind of already set up, right? And Sabbath for us was like, you've got to stop. Okay. Like, that's what it means. I think a lot of people go to rest. I go to stop. Okay. What am I stopping on this day? That's a great question to ask when it comes to intentionality. And so I know what I'm going to be about, and I know what I'm not going to be about. And there's a great book called Garden City that talks about work and rest. And both of those kind of hand in hand. And what we kind of filter is, we've created these filters of like, is it worshipful? Or is it restful? Is it enjoyable? Right? Like, that is our filter. And so I get up really early every day in order to grind hard. And I know that that's okay. And my body is going to break down because I've got a Saturday that I'm resting. Okay. And I'm letting my body do whatever. Sleep wise, like, sleep is so important. I let my body do whatever it wants to do on a Saturday. Okay. And I know a lot of sleep experts are going to come at me with a whole bunch of crap. I don't care. Like, I just let my body do whatever my body needs to do to rest. And then everything filters. For me, I really find enjoyment in mowing. Like, it is just something I love to do, but not always. So there are days that it is work, and there are days that it is rest. And what I'm really trying to do, especially in a realm of creativity and inspiration and innovation, really what the day is so necessary for is having a download of your subconscious. Like, you ever seen Inside Out, the movie? Have you seen the new one yet?
No, we're going next Tuesday night to see it.
Okay. I've seen it twice, cried. It's probably my new favorite, like, Pixar movie. Sorry, I just built it even bigger than I needed to.
No, you're not the first person that said that to me. Everybody that I know that's adult and have seen it, they're like, it's life changing. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Can't wait.
So in Inside Out, they're at the end of the day, when they're going to rest, they push a button and all those thoughts go back to long-term memory or something like that. I don't remember exactly where it goes, but like, they all get cleaned out for the next day. I think there's like that need for that on a whole given work week, because our minds are still working. even when we go to sleep and when we're going through that process. So to have a day where you're like, I'm choosing to not stress about the things from the week that I've got 6 other days to stress about. I'm choosing to be, and it's hard for someone driven because it feels like irresponsible. But I choose for a day to be irresponsible. I choose for a day to not have structure. I choose for a day to not have to check off any boxes. And by doing that, I feel like I get such a clean out. My Sundays are some of the most beautiful, creative, figuring out solutions to 6 days prior. I couldn't figure it out. Within the first moment of waking, I've got it because everything is cleaned out. Allow my subconscious to truly be the strongest part, right? Because it can come to conclusions way quicker than my front brain can. Yeah. And so after, I Sabbath on a Saturday, on a Sunday, all of a sudden, all that information is just, hey, it's like your subconscious comes up on Sunday after a Sabbath and it's like, hey, I packaged up all your worries and I came up with a solution. Here you go. And it's in this like pretty little box with a bow on it. And it's simpler than you thought it needed to be. And it is like profound. And you're like, yeah, whoa. So many people miss out on that because they don't take the time to do it because it feels irresponsible and feels like I'm not working. And all I can say to that is you're not. Okay. Like let whatever your belief is in God, whatever, let that be the hero. You don't need to be the hero. Let that be the hero and bring all of that to a culmination to show you if you would just rest, you would have the answer.
Yeah, I mean, there's no better way to end this conversation than that. Personally, I want to go, okay, but what are you doing on those days? And I know you're going to be like, no, there's no plan. We can talk about that more offline. But anyway, or we'll have you back to talk about it. But man, that was incredible. Thank you, Blake, so much for your time. If you want to find out where Blake is and what he's doing, where can they find you at, Blake?
The Culture Base. Come on over to the Culture Base. I don't really hop a whole lot on social media. So, I mean, you could probably find me on there, but you're going to be like, wow, this guy does nothing on here. And you're right. You are right.
Yeah. Being too intentional about other things, not super intentional about social media. But yeah, he's right. You can find us over at theculturebase.com and socials there. And we put out weekly podcasts there and stuff like that. And you can hear a little bit more of Blake's incredible wisdom. Thanks so much for joining me today, man. It was a real honor to have you on.
It was a blast.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to being back with you in a couple of weeks. Next week, July 4th, we'll be taking a break for the holiday. But then after that, we're going to be back with another guest episode. A new friend of mine, John Staub. We're going to get into the creative process, one of my favorite and most nerdy conversations we could ever have. I cannot wait to talk to you then on the Creativity Made Easy podcast.